you could think of it like a hybrid approach where you're not going all in on reference-based pricing. You're just sliding in a reference-based pricing plan and giving people the option to take it if they want. And because typically the employee contributions are so much less than the PPO plan, the RBP vendor, they're getting the bulk of the membership anyways. So those employees that take the plan are saving money. The plan is saving money, and everybody sort of wins.
Hello, fellow viewers, and welcome to another episode of ClaimTalk, where we explore the evolving landscape of all things reference-based pricing and network replacement. With me today is Omar Arif, our Senior Vice President of Growth, and our special guest visiting us from Florida, Mr. Paul Saunders from Saunders Company. Thank you both for joining us. Before we dive into the nuts and bolts of our topic, Paul, word on the street was that you weren't necessarily waving the RBP flag. You were actually a little resistant on it, correct? Can you give us a little bit more about that and some of your background as well?
Totally opposed. We saw RBP as a HR nightmare. Why were we going to put employees in the middle of a collection action? And if a client of ours was going to do RBP, we were going to talk them out of it so that when it blew up, it was their fault, not ours. And then we found you guys. So I was in Beaver Creek, Colorado, and a good friend of mine who was with AccuRisk was telling us about how Omar had cut a deal with ClaimDOC, and we could offer a dual option. And we were really intrigued by that because we really did feel that if you were going to offer RBP, you needed to have a full network buy-up to protect the employer and give the employees the option.
Sure.
And so we inherited a case. We became agent on a case that was with Cigna and AMPS. And the CFO called me up and said, I inherited my health plan. I hate my health plan. I don't even know what I have. And so we looked at it, and they had like 52% of their population in the RBP plan. So there was no way that you could take it out because it was just too much money. So we made the switch to UMR and ClaimDOC, and we're on, I think, our 22nd month with them. We've had no problems with you guys. And what was interesting is we were watching the run-out play out with Cigna and AMPS, and it was a disaster. I think we've had one balance bill letter in that 22-month period, and it got blown out because it violated all kinds of timelines, and we became converts.
Preaching the word of ClaimDOC. For our viewers who don't necessarily know exactly what dual option is and what it entails, Omar, could you tell me a little bit about what it is?
Similar to striking gold is what it is from my perspective. When you can go to an HR director or a CFO or whomever's making the decisions and say, hey, look, you don't have to force everybody onto this RBP plan that everyone may not be a great fit for. We can offer it right alongside a traditional PPO network and then just let people choose if they want to have a lower cost plan. And it's a much easier decision for a group plan to make versus saying, no, we're going to take everybody off of Blue Cross and force them onto ClaimDOC. No, it's like, let's let people vote with their paycheck, and they do. So that's sort of the baseline of what that dual option is. It's just network side by side with RBP.
Okay. And do you think this was more employer demand, or was it more broker innovation? How do you think it emerged?
I think it was kind of a combination of employers looking for alternative strategies, but, full reference-based pricing maybe didn't have the best reputation among employers and brokers. And so this is kind of like, you could think of it like a hybrid approach where you're not going all in on reference-based pricing. You're just sliding in a reference-based pricing plan and giving people the option to take it if they want. And because typically the employee contributions are so much less than the PPO plan, the RBP vendor, they're getting the bulk of the membership anyways. So those employees that take the plan are saving money. The plan is saving money, and everybody sort of wins. It's been a great strategy for ClaimDOC growth over the last couple of years.
Paul, how do you see employers structure their contributions, their benefit designs to incentivize their population to enroll in the reference-based pricing plan?
So we do two things. We will have identical plan designs, one with the full network, United Healthcare, one with reference-based pricing. The reference-based pricing contributions for the employees, we typically are reducing anywhere from 30 to 50% to drive the employees into that. And what's nice about that is employers are really struggling. How do we offer a truly low-cost plan? And reference-based pricing gives them the avenue to do that.
Yeah, those are the contribution differentials that we're looking for. So we typically see consultants either mirror plan designs and have a lower employee contribution or actually offset the deductibles as well. Mm-hmm. Because when you go to a population of blue-collar workers or maybe low-wage earners and say, hey, we're going to take your deductible from $5,000 to $3,000, and we're going to lower your biweekly contribution from $100 to $70, you're going to get the majority of the population to take that plan. And then the decision maker at the group and the consultant, they just have to trust ClaimDOC to do our job and manage that group, and we do.
Exactly. I actually saw a group that has been incentivizing people to enroll in the RBP plan by contributing a certain amount of money to their HSA. They have two different HSA plans, the network and the RBP one, and that's been very helpful in driving the excitement for the cost savings. I think education on both of those items are important, both plans. What do you see as successful in terms of the education for the members and for human resources as well?
I talk about that quite a bit because I think that the upfront communication and education that we do makes all the difference in the world for not only the transition, but the ongoing plan management. So if we're getting out front and training the HR folks, you talk about the train the trainer things that we do, and then also educating the population, mostly during open enrollment, and we do some education throughout the plan year as well, but they're paying attention during open enrollment for the most part. And so when we get that message out there, we run our Pave the Way program to make that transition smooth. It just sets us up for success long term. Because like we always talk about in the sales process, the savings is the easy part. Like we know we're going to save our groups tons of money. You can attest to that. The tricky part is the change management, and how to make that go well is like you said, it is the communication and education.
Agreed. So Paul, what kind of groups do you think would most benefit from a dual option? Thinking about the human resource department in the sense of them wanting to take on that extra responsibility, not necessarily asking them to become experts, of course, but taking on the learning of this new plan and how to communicate it and work with their broker partner, with ClaimDOC to make sure that it's successful.
Well, having the full network option removes a lot of objections. We would tell a client that we can certainly get to total replacement. It's probably a multi-year deal, but you need to start out and give people the option to be able to maintain the full network. Your Pave the Way program, we're big fans of. The success rate on that is very high. So if you're a self-funded case and you can pull all your providers and facilities you've used in the last 12 months, and then we've had great success with you guys, having you identify, okay, these are the people that have actually accepted our terms. These are the people that are in the HealthSmart network through the Omar relationship. And these are the people that we haven't approached yet. And that paints a great story for the employees.
Do you find that you get any healthy level of skepticism when you talk to your employers about this strategy?
They're really looking for the other shoe to drop. Okay. How can it be this good? And really
That's my favorite question.
Yeah, the issue is that we tell everybody is that RBP, ClaimDOC, will work for everybody. You just have to navigate some noise. Mm-hmm. You can mitigate the noise if the employee is proactive and does pave the way. You guys do a great job dealing with the providers and facilities after the fact if they don't do that. But once you have navigated that, then the noise dies down. And the savings is so significant, it's worth the noise.
Yes. And I would have to say that, yes, we're aiming for savings, but we're also aiming for sustainability, right? So if we're not taking care of the member, if we're not empowering them to use their health plan as they're expecting it to work, then things begin to fall apart and we have employers wanting to revert back to where they were. And that's the last thing that we want. What about you, Omar? Have you encountered any skepticism? How do you overcome that when you're speaking to your prospective clients?
Yeah, we see a lot of it because we cast a pretty wide net in the broker consultant world. And so all of our business comes from probably 3 or 4% of the brokers that we talk to. So the other, 95, 96% of them probably don't believe it can be as good as it is and are scared to bring it into their clients because, it's their livelihood too. They bring in the wrong solution, they're getting fired. So I understand some of that, but it's why we're talking about this topic on this episode is because we're introducing a way to protect the consultant. When you've got a network backstop in place, everything becomes a little bit easier. And we know from the data that we're going to get the bulk of the membership and then, the smaller piece of the group that would have been probably the noisy ones anyways. You're talking about like the high utilizers who see 3 or 4 different doctors and they don't want to have to reach out to ClaimDOC. They just want a traditional PPO plan. Like, great, let's leave the 20% of the population on that traditional plan. And if they're willing to pay for it, then great. But for everybody else who needs the cost savings, it's there. And people overwhelmingly vote with their paycheck. I mean, I nerd out on all these benefit trend studies that come out every year. And a common theme among all of them is that, the first thing that employees care about the most is what's coming out of my paycheck. Okay, well, we can solve for that. The second thing is, how much do I have to pay when I need to use it? Well, we can solve for that too. And then the third thing is, okay, who's the insurance company? So if we can help with the first two and do all the communication and education to get them comfortable with who we are as an organization, then it's a win for everybody because they know who Blue Cross is, they know who United is. They don't always know who ClaimDOC is, but that's why our advocacy services are so important.
Agreed. We do a lot of proactive outreach, not just to the providers, but to the members that are considering enrolling in the dual option plans to introduce ourselves, introduce the services that we offer, and get that pave the way program started even before open enrollment hits. So if we have some of those high utilizers, some of those VIPs that can even speak to their experience when they're interacting with our team, that's gold for them and for us, and we get more people on the plan, right?
Yeah.
Because we convert them. Obviously, there are going to be individuals that are more comfortable with the familiarity of that PPO plan. Are there certain demographics or certain, again, maybe just industries of employers that are more well-suited for this type of dual option, or can it work for everyone? The size of the employer matter?
We don't see anybody that's off limits for this. Every industry, blue collar, white collar, gray collar, it all works. It really does. And it's just like what you said, Omar. If you have the contribution structured appropriately, you're going to drive a lot of participation. And what happens is the employees who are on the RBP plan, they begin to realize that their claim starting point is so much lower than the people on the full UHC network. And it becomes very apparent in an HSA model. And that word spreads. It really does.
Do you find that employees will enroll in the plan the second year because of that water cooler talk, because of the experience that everybody else is having?
We do see an uptick in year 2. Some of it is driven by employee choice, and if we do a good job, some of it is driven by executive leadership when they see the cost differential. Like your cost per covered is going to be way lower on our plan than a network plan, so they may pull the network out altogether. Going back to your question about industries and demographics, we've traditionally been blue and gray collar, and that's still most of our business today. But now we have decision makers at these groups that maybe they can afford a traditional plan, but they're just now so indignant to the system that they're wanting to make the switch because they're just tired of getting screwed. I mean, we have a couple investment firms who have way high average salaries that are on our books. We have, engineering firms, architecture firms, IT firms that these people make plenty of money and they can afford the Blue Cross premiums. They just don't want it anymore. So, do we have a whole bunch of Silicon Valley tech shops and law firms? No, but those people are starting to come around too.
Yeah, I've seen an uptick in those type of clients as well, especially this year. So has there been a case where this hasn't worked for either of you?
Well, I don't have enough track record. So we inherited our first case. We've moved our second case, 8-1. We've got 4 or 5 cases that are going to move, 1-1. It's all been positive. So I don't have a negative example.
Okay.
Yeah, I think...
Knock on wood.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. You know this probably better than me, Steph, but I'd say, any time we're dealing with a group where leadership maybe hasn't fully bought in or they underappreciate some of the services that we're offering, things can go sideways. Or if we're dealing with a group that's got pockets of people in an area where there's one health system that dominates the market and they just don't want to play ball, then we've got to figure out how to navigate around that or go cut a deal with that particular health system. And so I'm not saying it's perfect. There are tricky situations that we have to navigate. But when we've got, legal in-house, provider relations in-house, all the advocacy services, we can certainly help with any type of problem areas or groups that are having trouble.
Yeah.
One important thing to note is when you put in RBP, the client is going to agree to it largely because of the significant savings. In year 2, they are always going to want you to price getting rid of RBP. And that's going to be a function of noise. Mm-hmm. And so you can price that. And the minute they see the amount of money they have to take back on, it ends the conversation. And really unless you have a change in leadership, mm-hmm. Where you might have to do that again to prove it out, after that second year, you should be good to go.
I'd have to agree that the change in leadership has been significant, especially if that HR leader or a CFO has been burned by RBP in the past, mm-hmm. and they have a closed mind and just don't want to hear it. They want to go back to the bukas, but hopefully they get on board and the employees voice their concerns, right? Because it's going to trickle down to the employees, to their premiums and their benefits. What type of considerations does HR need to keep in mind when they're proponents of a plan like this?
Well, the fundamental challenge of HR is always getting the employees to pay attention. Okay, here we are, open enrollment, and we're going to talk, we're not going to listen. And so that's a real challenge. If we can get far enough out in front of it, which is really a function of the client size, number of employees, a lot of the pave the way stuff can happen on the front end.
Agreed.
And that's the biggest concern of HR, is how do I get my employees to fundamentally realize that 96% of the providers and facilities are going to take this deal, so that the employees get comfortable with it.
Yes. And we've had employers that have done a lot of passive enrollment in the past, and we strongly encourage them to convert that to an active enrollment, especially when they're adding a new plan to their suite of benefits. We have people who do weekly education sessions so that ClaimDOC can jump on and deliver the great news and all about our services. I think when you put a face to the name, it helps the employees, build trust with us and lean into the benefits and what we have to offer. Okay, Omar, so how do you see all of this evolving in the future? Do you think more carriers are going to come on board and offer this type of dual option? What are your predictions?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to. There's just so much demand for it. We've seen, far more demand this season than we've ever seen in the past. And so from a new business perspective, things are good. I think the carriers are going to have to get more flexible with offering their program alongside of RBP like ours, mm-hmm. because the employers of the world just can't keep taking on, 8 to 10% increases. People say that medical trend, I don't know what you think the number is, but the experts that I hear say 7, 8, 9, 10%. And that just can't continue to go on when you've got these plans. I put out there on LinkedIn that I've got this new term for group plans that are what I call maxed out, where the employees already have a $5,000 or $6,000 deductible. They can barely afford the premiums for that. The employer doesn't have the budget for another 10% increase, and they just got one. Mm-hmm. Or maybe they got a 20% increase negotiated down to 12. Okay, well, you still can't afford that 12. So now you almost have to do something different. And so I think that as this sort of hybrid approach evolves, there'll be more carriers and more TPAs looking at offering these types of benefits.
Paul, what do you think those employers that are maxed out need to do? What if their consultant isn't putting these type of options on the table? How are they supposed to
call
get out
Paul?
Of that? Yeah.
We're happy to talk to them. The only way to win in the health insurance game is you have to be self-funded. And typically for an employer, it's the number 2 or 3 item on a P&L, and all it's doing is going up. So when you can be self-funded and go from paying the highest price to paying the lowest price, do things like carve out your pharmacy, put in a reference-based pricing option, that's how you start winning.
Yeah, you have to get creative. Any other insights, any last words that you guys would like to give our audience?
I will say that for employers that may be out there listening, you have to have a consultant that is either an expert or willing to learn about these types of strategies to do it effectively. I mean, we wrote the network replacement guide that I helped write a couple years ago, and the bulk of that, basically a how-to guide for HR, was make sure your consultant is an expert in this field. Otherwise, they're going to give you bad advice, and things can go sideways really quickly. So, yeah, that's my piece on that. Call Paul.
There you go. I think Omar said it. Employers are very tired of being in this ever-increasing spiral, and you have to go self-funded. And what's interesting is in Florida, we can actually deploy that down to 25 employees. I think our smallest self-funded client has about 38 on the plan, and it just changes the game. Because the other thing that it does, too, is in Florida, for example, we really have 4 carriers. You have Blues, United, Cigna, Aetna. You're already with one of them. When you go self-funded, you all of a sudden expand that pool to like 20 or 30 carriers, because now the insurance piece is the reinsurance market. And that's a totally different game.
All right. Well, thank you both so much for lending your expertise and for joining us on the episode today. There you have it, folks. We've talked about all the ins and outs of the dual option. If this is something that sounds interesting to you or you want to talk more about this, please reach out to ClaimDOC and to Paul. Thank you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, and share.